Okay, here we are for our last talk of the second day of the second complex system workshop. So next and last on the row of today is Fernanda Valdovinos. She's an assistant professor at the Environmental Science and Policy Department at the University of California, Davis. At her lab, they study the structure and dynamics of ecological networks at ecological and evolutionary scales, including resilience, biodiversity loss, biological invasions, climate change, and exploitation by humans. So that's a lot. So welcome you, Fernanda, to this workshop, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Tomas. It's a pleasure to join this workshop virtually as everybody else, and I thank the organizers for the invitation. I will talk about how we can integrate network ecology with other theories. And I will present this, where is my laser? I will present these two papers that just came out. One in Science Advances, in which we integrated economic dynamics into ecological networks, specifically into the allometric network model, if you are aware of the ATN model, to study the case of fisheries, in particular fishery sustainability. The second is this paper that is in press in the American Naturalist, in which we integrated network ecology with coexistence theory by expanding the contemporary niche theory to mutualistic systems. I want to emphasize first that the aim of my talk is to motivate your interest in these questions, not to really cover the methodological details of our studies. If you're interested, please check the papers where the mathematical, computational, and statistical methods we used are explained in great detail, especially in the supplementary materials and appendices. So let's start with the fisheries case. In this paper, we evaluated the bioeconomic feedback loop that occurs between the fishing effort, represented here by this boat, that then affects the food web by harvesting on one or several of the fish or other harvesting species, that then affects the food web, and that yield that the fisheries extract affect the price of the harvested species, which then in turn affects the fishing effort. And again, the loop starts. So this is the bioeconomic feedback loop that we focus on in this paper. That is what we're doing here, is that we are integrating humans not as external factors, as many of us have done in the past, like the ones that you extract something and you're not modeling the dynamics of the human activity itself, but as integrated components. And studying this bioeconomic feedback loop is important to address the unsustainability of fisheries. I'm sure most of you have heard about how fisheries are collapsing worldwide. And it's not just the taxa itself that is being extracted, but also the community that these fish are part of. So causing the impoverishment of biological communities in oceans, as illustrated here, when we see these very rich communities with different types of species, different sizes of fish, and then as the fisheries extract the harvested species, you get a high reduction of the species richness. And we see here that we have only anchovies, yellow jellyfish, zooplankton, and unicellular phytoplankton. So this crisis has been reported by the United Nations as unsustainable. But we can just not ban fishing because it is the source of income and food of many people. So it's not that just because of the ecological reasons, we just make the fishing completely prohibited. Thus, our questions are how we can, let me just a second. I have, I think my email running in here. 1 second. I will just close this. I don't want to get distracted. Okay. So our questions are how we can both achieve ecological and economic sustainability. And we answered these questions using one single species fishery. So several fisheries, but on a single species each time, in which we study the conditions by which harvested species go extinct, and we labeled the harvest extinctions as H for harvested and extinctions, which conditions then also make the non-harvested species go extinct, which we labeled NH extinctions. You will see why I'm using this, because later you will see a lot of acronyms. And then we also studied the economic sustainability. And for that, we studied the conditions by which the fishery persists and the level of supported fishing effort. Because as I said, effort is also employment and food for the communities, human communities. So what is this measure of fishing effort? It measures the amount of fishing. And that is a combination of inputs that can be sometimes a little abstract, but it represents the number of hours or days spent fishing, numbers of hooks used, if we are talking about long line fishing, and kilometers of nets used, or number of boats, etc. So this has been the major metric used for fishing in terms of how we can manage fisheries. These questions have been studied before using the maximum sustainable yield approach, which is useful for some types of questions, but most of the time considers species in isolation of their ecological context. And we know that harvested species are part of a large network of interacting species. Previous studies have used this more larger approach using the ecopath with ecosim to incorporate such ecological context, which is a modulated mass balance model based on a large series of specific ODEs, ordinary differential equations. But this approach relies on extensive list of estimated parameters that are both system and species specific. It's very useful to manage specific systems, but very limited to study general patterns in fundamental dynamics. That is our interest in this study. So our study is complementary to this approach. So network ecology can help here, because we can use what we know about network ecology to understand general underlying mechanisms driving the bioeconomic feedback loop. And for that, we use the allometric trophic network model, and in which, very briefly, we'll explain it, the consumers are driven by this governing equation that is about biomass. First of all, we're not talking about densities, in which there is a maintenance loss, gain from resources, and loss to consumers. The same there's also a governing equation for the producers in the food web, in which we have the gain from producer growth and loss to consumer. The important part of this model is that we can parameterize it using the body size of the species. And the key parameter here is the metabolic rate, which depends on the body size and gets into these different terms. We extend the ATN model to incorporate fishing effort right there. And I will explain then how we incorporated the price and how the dynamics of the economy of fisheries gets involved here. But first, I will emphasize that we used two treatments. One is the regulated fixed effort, that this effort here stays constant, is set at the beginning of the fishing time. And so here is the ATN model. So this are the biomasses without fishing, so the trajectories of the biomasses over time. And then at time 4,000, we start a fishing effort of a given value. We run thousands of simulations. So in this particular case, it's effort 20, but there are several other values that we run. So it's without fishing, and then we start fishing on the single harvested species. And then with the open access, that effort that started at time 4,000 at value of 1 will start varying depending on the yield and the price of the fish. So I'm not going to talk about the fixed effort because I have limited time. And the only thing I want to emphasize is that the harvesting species with higher initial biomasses before fishing more negatively impacts the rest of the species in the food web. This is critical for you to understand. And I will just go back to here to illustrate that. So we found a negative, like a nonlinear relation between the initial biomass of the fish before fishing. This is before fishing. So when we run the simulations, and it's the biomass of the fish at the moment of starting fishing. Like a surprise for us, then start increasing again. So if you see the trophic level of 4, between 4 and 5 of the fish, if it's a larger fish, there is a point in which being a higher biomass might make the fish more likely to go extinct. So we understand clearly why this happens is because the larger the biomass, the more resistant is the fish to go extinct when it's harvested. But the increase here is because the community gets more affected when you extract the fish with the highest biomass. Please remember that. That's the one that, and that occurs because of some variability. So that if you extract the biomass, if you extract the fish with the highest biomass, the variability, the perturbation you make in the food web is much larger than when you extract the biomass of a fish with lower biomass. So that's something I will use in the next part. So what we care about is the open access, because there is where we see this bioeconomic feedback loop. So that effort that I showed, the fishing effort that was fixed in the previous treatment, now has a dynamic equation that depends on the market reactivity to profit and the gross profit. This profit depends on the price. The price will have also a dynamic equation, and the yield, how much the fisheries are extracting from the food web, and then a cost of that effort. So the linear pricing model we are using is this one that we took from Conrad 1999, well-known natural resources economist. And the key parameters here are the maximum market price, that it will determine the price of the fish, and the yield as well. And the yield is the biomass of the harvested species. So more than showing the equation, I want to say what exactly conceptually we are doing here. So the higher maximum price reflects higher base demand for these harvested species. So that's one important concept that we are going to use, the higher maximum price, which reflects the demand we have for these harvested species. Like the higher the maximum price, the higher will be the demand for this fish. And the higher the biomass of these harvested species before fishing provides potential yield to meet demand, therefore thereby driving greater profits and effort. And remember that effort is how much we extract from that harvested species. And then this is like the reverse. With sufficiently low demand or yield, net profit is consistently negative and the effort declines to zero, meaning that the fishery fails to sustain itself. So on one hand, we are going to ask whether the harvested species is going to go extinct or the non-harvested species in the community. On the other hand, we are going to ask whether the effort is sustained economically. So we ran thousands of simulations in a cluster, doing all the sensitivity analysis you want, varying price, all these different values, market reactivity, price sensitivity. We generated 480 webs. If you multiply those, these webs, we generated them using the niche model. So we are not using empirical data. We are using an algorithm that produces food webs that are close to the ones we observed in nature. Then we ran 6 different price values to each of those webs, 5 different mean values, etc., with thousands, like millions of data points. And again, just to remind you, what we're doing is we start the simulations with each of those simulations with the ATN model and one particular niche food web. And then we start the dynamics of the fisheries, which has an effort that depends on the price and yield of the harvested species. Okay, so now we start with the results. The maximum price and harvestable initial biomass, the initial biomass of the fish before we started fishing, drives the peaks in effort. Those are the peaks in effort, right? So we care about these peaks because each time that the effort gets to these peaks in value, it will be removing a lot of fish from the food web. So this is just to emphasize that these are the two key parameter and variable. Parameter, the maximum price, and the initial biomass of the fish. Two key. Two for this effort. Also, another important result that was expected anyway is that the effort self-corrects. So if the yield goes down, that is, if the biomass of the harvested species starts to decline, the effort will go down because there is not enough fish for the demand, and the price will go down, and so on, until sometimes we get to this stationary, stable equilibrium, stationary equilibrium. But not always, especially not when the maximum price or harvestable initial biomass are high. And that's what is going to be behind the results I will show next. So here I'm showing different fisheries outcomes. And what we see here is that the ones in pink are or magenta, are the ones that are failed. And what we're talking about this fisheries outcome is if the fishery is staying or not on business, if it's going or not out of business. So failed meant that the fishery went out of business, sustained that it stayed. Here, what we're doing then is the maximum price in the x-axis, in the y-axis is the initial biomass of the fish. So what we see here is that at higher maximum prices, right there, the abundance, so is when you see more failed fisheries. And I will explain this result. So first, let's talk about when it gets sustained. So harvesting the most abundant fish, so up there, you see that it's more abundant above here. Harvesting the most abundant fish per food web sustained more fisheries. In particular, 78% of the simulations were sustained when the abundance of the fish was high than harvesting randomly chosen fish populations. That sometimes is not, of course, the most abundant species. So that's why only 26 of the simulations were sustained. Then the higher prices, that is high demand, can sustain effort on rare species by supporting higher profits on lower yield. And that explains why we get extinctions. So what is happening is that when the price is very high, the effort stays high, even when the yield is going down. And then the self-correction happens too late and the species go extinct. So this is the punchline I want you to remember. Combinations of sufficiently high maximum price and high abundances of the fish before fishing can increase effort to levels that cause the harvested species go extinct before self-correction occurs, especially in fisheries with high growth potential, that is high prices and high biomass of the fish before fishing, and high sensitivity to profit. And that's what we show here. There is the ones that are these are the different types of fishery outcomes, and you see that several of the failed fishery are the ones that the fish went extinct. And here is when the profit declined, that is, there was unsustained effort, but because of economic reasons. And then some were sustained. Here is showing what I just said a couple of slides before, that is harvesting on species with higher harvestable biomasses more likely caused their extinction, which is completely the opposite that we found when we did the fixed effort. And so then what we see here is that the higher the biomass, this harvestable biomass, or the biomass of the fish before we start fishing, the shorter it takes for the fish to go extinct. And this is to remind you that we need to remember this effect on the rest of the community. So if we fish on the higher initial biomasses, we get the most negative impacts on the rest of the food web. And that's what I show here, is that the higher the open access maximum price, the higher the demand for this fish, we start getting more extinctions of the harvested species, but a lot of extinctions on the non-harvested species, because we are affecting these other species in the community by a lot. And these are this is my last slide on this particular paper. And so what is one of the conclusions here, and is shown in this figure, in which we have different effort levels for both the fixed, that is what would be the regulated market, and the open and sustained. So these are only the open access treatments that were sustained in time economically. So we see that the percentage of the community that went extinct, with the different effort levels that were the same for both the fixed and open and sustained market, is that we have these many more extinctions of the rest of the community when we are in the open access case. And this is because this self-regulation is good for the harvested species, but not so good for the rest of the community. It makes the rest of the species vary a lot more, oscillate a lot more, and that causes extinctions. Some conclusions here. We studied the integrated feedback processes. This the regulated fixed effort and the open access. We found nonlinear economic sustainability. So we are, as you remember, we are studying the sustainability of these fisheries from both point of view, the ecological and the economic point of view. And for both of them, we found that there was this nonlinear effect of the initial biomass of the harvested species. This same variable, this biomass, drives variations in effort and exacerbates the ecological costs of harvesting in open access fisheries. And in general, what we found is that temporary fluctuations in effort above sustainable levels are known process in the cycle of adjustment seen in open access fisheries. So we're reproducing the results that economists have found here in this paper, Fuller et al. 2013. But what we do in addition to that is that we found that those have indirect effects that can drastically change the food web structure through local species extinctions. So overall, our results indicate that considering the sustainability of an ecosystem and the services that it provides requires accounting for its surrounding ecology and its interface with the economy that it provides. And finally, our study demonstrates the flexibility of network approaches to integrate external anthropogenic variables change years completely. So now we're changing to the land and to mutualistic networks, especially these plant pollinator beautiful systems. This is a picture of our study sites in the Rocky Mountain laboratory in Colorado, taken by Judy Bronstein, though, not by me. And what we do here, and this is really theoretical, not much about this beautiful place, is develop a niche theory for mutualism. And I'm going to show this graphical approach to plant pollinator networks, and not just network dynamics, that Robert Marsland and I developed. Species, and the other side, the pollinator species, the links connect them in terms of who visits whom. And they are very important because they sustain terrestrial biodiversity. Around 300,000 flowering plants species. So we have around our food security. Around 75% of the globally important crop types depend on, in terms of quality or quantity, on pollination, which account for around 200 to 600 billion a year in food production. But even when these systems are very important, we still need more ecological theory. The ecological theory we have on mutualism lags behind the one of competition and trophic interactions. In particular, we wanted to expand our theoretical knowledge of species coexistence in mutualistic systems. And for that, first, we needed to use a model that has more mechanisms than the Lotka-Volterra type model. In particular, we use the model I created and have worked on for several years that incorporates consumer resource interactions into the study of mutualistic networks. What this model has different from the Lotka-Volterra type model, well, a lot of things, but in particular, the dynamics of the plants is decomposed. One is one equation for the vegetative growth of the plant, the other for the rewards. That is to decouple the time scales. It's not explicit really, but just by having two equations, there are things that happen in a way that we're not confounding the consumption of rewards by the pollinator, that is a trophic interaction, with the pollination, that is the pollination service the pollinator provides to the plant. So the pollination increase the vegetative growth of the plant if it carries the pollen grains of the plant, and if the germination rate is the right one. I will show you equations later. But the point here is that by decoupling these two, we can now study better coexistence among pollinators and coexistence among plants. And also adaptive foraging. So the pollinator will assign more foraging effort on the rewards that are more abundant. So it will visit more often the plants with higher rewards than the plant with lower rewards. So I have found before this particular study that adaptive foraging causes this niche partitioning. And without adaptive foraging, what happens is that in a nested network, the pollinator that is a specialist on the most generalist plant will get very limited rewards and most likely go extinct. And the pollinator that is more generalist has all these different resources, so it will persist. With adaptive foraging, the pollinator, the generalist pollinator will in fact specialized on the specialist plant that is less visited, so it has more rewards. You can see it here. So because without adaptive foraging, and also at the start of the simulations, the specialist plant will have more rewards. So the adaptive forager, the generalist one, will assign more efforts on that particular plant, which will release the rewards of the generalist plant, and then the pollinator will persist. The specialist pollinator will persist. The same happens for the plants. I will not talk today about the plants, but there is also niche partitioning for the plants, and that is because I'm modeling in this particular. So this particular model has the dilution of pollen incorporated, and so there is this niche partitioning regarding that, if the pollen is the right one, the same kind of specific pollen. Okay, so I know that I'm running out of time, so this will really be an overview of what we did. So the niche theory for mutualism, what we did is to provide analytical understanding for the results found with extensive numerical simulations that we called in the paper previous simulations, and generalize some of them beyond the original simulation conditions. And by analytical understanding, we refer to finding those results using graphical approach whose geometry rigorously reflects mathematical analysis. So this was a big deal for me. I've been running simulations my whole career, and then with Bobby, Robert Marsland, we were able to find analytical, and we have to repeat it, analytical solutions to many of my simulations. And that was huge for me. So everybody, all those reviewers that were attacking me because of all my parameters, now I have something to show that it was beyond the sensitivity analysis I did. Now it's clear that these have an analytical backup. Okay, so this is the model. As I said, I don't have enough time to cover it, but you have 4 differential equations, many parameters, but they are all, most of them between 0 and 1, and you can really make sense of them. So it's very easy to run this model with biological understanding. So the model is really created from my biological understanding of pollination, and the parameters make a lot of sense biologically. That's why it's easy to run the model, even with all those parameters, and it's also easy to do sensitivity analysis of the choices in parameter values. Okay, so we developed a graphical approach, including the conditions for coexistence among adaptive pollinators sharing floral rewards, and how we use projections to analyze high-dimensional systems. So the figures we show are mostly for 3 and 3 pollinators, 3 plant species, but we show how the isoclines that we're showing are projections of high-dimensional systems, that is for hundreds of species if you want. So it works for networks. So our graphical approach promotes, and this is like the big take-home message, you can read the paper, but our graphical approach promotes the unification of niche and network theories and deepens the synthesis of different types of interactions within a consumer resource framework. So just to show you some of the isoclines we worked on. So what we have, this is just an illustration. What we're doing is a reward space. There's rewards 1 in the x-axis, rewards 2 in the y-axis, and the isoclines, typical Z and GIs that you see in niche theory, but now applied to mutualisms. So if you're in this space of rewards, the orange pollinator will win. If you're in the blue region, the blue wins. And if you're in the gray region, there is coexistence. When I'm saying when you are, is actually the supply point. When the supply points lands here, etc. So when the supply points lands in the gray region, there is coexistence among pollinators, and their equilibrium will be here where the isoclines intersect. I don't have time for that, but the important part is that these 3 quantities, the Z and GIs, the impact vectors that are these ones, and the supply point define the conditions for stable coexistence. And another important thing, so this is really something that is shared with the traditional models of resource competition, but the angle, and given that I'm here, I will explain it. The impact of a pollinator species is, so this is the impact niche, which is the impact vector, is the rate at which it depletes the floral rewards. And this is the same as traditional models of resource competition. But the angle is the critical part that is new, because that angle determines the visit quality. So this angle here, we are talking about the impact of the blue pollinator is not only how much it extracts from the rewards, but also the visit quality to that particular plant species. Okay, so then using this approach, we were able to reproduce 3 particular results that are my last 3 slides of the presentation. So one of the results I have found before is that without adaptive foraging, specialist pollinators go extinct in nested networks. And that's what you see in this diagram here. We have pollinators and plants. The 2 specialist pollinators go extinct. If we represent the 3x3 system here in the cube, is the maximum you can visualize in the screen. I would do 100 on 100, but I cannot show that in the screen. So you have these planes that represent the zero growth planes of each of the species. And then in the gray plane here, so this is the blue plane for the blue pollinator, the green plane for the green pollinator, and the orange plane for the orange pollinator. The gray one here is where we are projecting the isoclines. And then we can do the whole coexistence theory again, back using the niche theory here. So when we project that to this plane, we see that if the supply point lands here, the only pollinator that persists is the generalist one. And that's what I found in simulations and now gets verified with this graphical approach. Then with adaptive foraging species, there is species coexistence because these isoclines actually rotate, which engulfs the supply point. So because this pollinator, the generalist, will focus on the specialist plant with adaptive foraging, this isocline moves to the counterclockwise and engulfs the supply point, and now there is species coexistence. Finally, and this is my last slide, the other results I have found is that native pollinators that have alternative resources survive to the invasion of efficient alien pollinators. So this is a whole paper I published in Nature Communications on the invasion of pollinator species. And now we verified the results analytically. So if the invader connects to these two plants, which are also the plants of these pollinators, so the native pollinators don't have alternative resources, I found that these go extinct. Well, that's what happens here. So because this is an efficient alien pollinator, the isoclines don't cross anymore in one point. So this is the isocline of the invader, and we see that if the supply point lands here, then all of them go extinct. And the opposite happens when there is one native pollinator that has an alternative resource that is not the one used by this efficient invader. So this pollinator is capable to reassign its foraging efforts to the specialist plant, in this case. In that way, it will survive with lower abundances. And we show the same. You will need to read the paper and have more time, but we show the same happens here. All the mathematical analysis, there is a lot of equations and derivations are in the appendices of the paper. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Fernanda. That's love your talk because it's network ecology everywhere. I work on that, so that's a very biased opinion. So, is there any question or comment from the audience? Yes, Hugo. Yes, I haven't seen you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Very nice talk, Fernanda. Very interesting. I have two questions. The first one is, my understanding is that you are trying to bring the niche framework into plant pollinator networks. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so with a Turkish colleague, we did something like this some years ago, and we found that a variable from the pollinators and the plants that correlates quite good with the niche is the proboscis length in the case of pollinators and the corolla depth in the case of plants. So I don't know if you are taking this kind of mechanistic approaches in the interaction between plants and pollinators, or you are considering things more generally?
Yes, in another work though, not in this particular project that is more general, right? Like it's more elegant. But in actually Rumble, let me see, this place actually, that place. We are conducting, we finished already a project. We have to analyze the empirical data in which with Barry Brosi, my collaborator, and he's the empiricist on our group, So we are taking all those different traits, in particular, what you said, and we are, how should I say that? We're restricting the potential links by the morphology, but those ones.
Okay.
So instead of doing the whole niche theory that is really more in another level of abstraction, we are restricting all the potential interactions in this particular study system with the morphology, and then we run the adaptive foraging on top, because adaptive foraging is all about rewards. We have that previous layer that is the species traits that determine who can actually access those rewards.
Exactly. Okay, very interesting. So you have this data collected right now?
Yes, it's been collected. COVID-19 was not very helpful for that, but we've been collecting at least 3 years of that type of data every summer.
Okay.
And my postdoc Paul Glom, already developed the initial steps for like restricting this network by morphology. We just need to get the finalized data to actually run the algorithm and then run the model.
Okay, very interesting. So I will be, waiting for this. Okay, the second question is, when you showed your model, this was reminiscent of something I was trying to convince the ecologist, but I completely failed. But it was that trying to model this in terms of evolutionary game theory. Okay, because you can see this as an evolutionary game in which you have a payoff matrix in which the species either of plants or of pollinators can cheat to attract the opponents, the partners, and they can in this way they can have different strategies, and these different strategies have different payoffs. And then I think that this would be very nice to model all of you have in terms of game theory.
Yeah, and I think it's been done, not for networks really that I know of, you never know, but it's been done for the evolution of cooperation and in some cases for the evolution of cheating in mutualism. So it's not completely crazy what you're saying. It's been done before. I don't know. I'm not super updated on the literature where it stands right now but it's been done. It's been done for sure for the evolution of cooperation, and I know of some of older studies for evolution of cheating in mutualism.
Okay, so maybe this is
but fewer species. Yeah, fewer species though, not in a network scale.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So there's a question from Si Cheng. Sorry for that pronunciation. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very inspiring talk. I have 2 questions about the fishery part. So I think you pointed out that the initial biomass of fish before being harvested is the key factor that determine basically like the dynamics of the community at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I might miss the key information here, but did you base these initial abundance on empirical data, or you estimated based on, for example, body mass scaling rules or something?
Oh, wait just a second. I'm in so many different projects with using this model that I blanked out right now. For sure, no empirical data. Mm-hmm. We have done that with other study that we had empirical data. For this particular one, I have the paper in front of me. Let me see. I forgot, honestly. It's theoretical completely, so it's not empirical data. And well, first of all, that like the very, yes, I know how to respond this. So I have to emphasize first that one thing is, where's my laser? One thing is the initial biomass, very, very initial, that is drawn by randomly. The biomass that we're talking about is the one that you get after you run this supposedly realistic model. So if your question goes to, well, how much we can trust that variable, well, it's the one that you get after running the model that has all the interaction strength and the food web topology and the consumption and the metabolic rates. All what the model contains is what it provides, what gives you this initial biomass that is not the initial, but is before fishing,
Okay,
right before
perfect.
fishing. So right here.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and following up, so for the abundances at this point, will those like higher biomass species coincidentally be the, for example, larger size fish and higher trophic level fish?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So basically,
No.
you cover the conditions where the highest biomass fish basically can be either large fish, medium fish, or small fish, and
Correct.
still the biomass at this point still the key parameter driven all the
Correct.
others. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That's very, very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Juan, yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Fernanda, for your presentation. I also have 3 clarifying questions with the fishery study. The first one is whether the model has a size structure at the species level, so if you account for adults, juveniles. The second is if the model allows for the reversal of the interaction strength between species. The question goes to, we observed that in the Baltic Sea, where when cod collapses, a sprat could eat the juveniles of cod, but typically on the food web is cod who is predating on the sprat. And the third question is whether it allows for cannibalism.
Yeah, okay, so it does allow for cannibalism because it is based on the ATN model. So the niche, well, the ATN model can have the niche model. So the niche model, the ones that we run to produce the food webs, it allows for cannibalism. Like usually you get like a 20% of the species with cannibalism when you run the ATN model. I remember the first question as well, which is age structure, not for this particular model. If you're interested, I can show you. It's always annoying to be showing your computer to the world, but anyway, you can see. Let me see, where is Cooperinian? No, it's not this one. Cooperinian is this one. So this study has what you want. Fishing-induced life history changes to grade and destabilize harvested. So that one has, you see, perch 1, so perch 0, perch 1, perch 2, perch 3, perch 4. So this particular study, we studied the stage structure of 2 fish species, and we found important results in terms of that depending on where you fish, if the newborn or like, you have important results. So stage structure matters in fisheries for sure. It's just that we couldn't, like, we need to start somewhere with the this feedback, this bioeconomic feedback loop. It was already complex enough. So first that, then we can maybe think of incorporating stage structure as we have done in the past. Good. Thanks.
Any other comment? Yes, Leo.
Yes, it was most a comment that other thing that I was thinking that when you in fisheries you have the with related to size of the individuals. When you have a fishery, the size of the individuals change.
Yeah.
Because some are captured, the smaller ones are not captured. So, but then if you use the allometric equations to parameterize the model, you will have some changes in the parameters that are not inside the model. It would be interesting to take into account that, I think.
Yeah, with Anna Kuperinian, we've been doing a lot of that. We have published like 3 papers on that kind of stuff. In particular, this paper, if you read, it has that. It has like, we're changing decreasing body size for adults. So we are incorporating that in this paper. And parameters as maturation and body size, that are the 2 things that we know fisheries have affected, have been incorporated here. Just more like force, like we just initiate the fisheries with lower body size and with a fast maturity of fast maturation. We are not yet done with making them like evolve, but just forcing them to go down with fisheries. So yes, we are aware of that. We have published on that. It's just that we wanted now to understand the bioeconomic feedback loop. So we are not incorporating, right. Well, in terms of fisheries, I think that we have like at least 7 papers. So some submitted, some published. So each of them cover different aspects. We haven't combined them all in one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. I do have a question. Probably it's already in the supplementary material, as you said, but it's related to your first part of the talk. You said that you didn't use empirical food web data, but you used you created food webs with a niche model, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you tried using other kinds of food web models like cascade or nested hierarchy or
no?
And okay, and what kind of or what type of niche model did you use?
The very original one, Williams and Martinez, 2000.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's the very It's like after all that like discussion debate of which one is better, I think that at the end, given the simplicity of that model, it works pretty well. I follow the literature for all those, I don't know, 20 models of food webs. And at the end, we just stick to the original one for simplicity more than anything.
Yeah, at the end, some modification of the niche model is the one that captures the best. The
best, yeah, but it's not a lot more. It's like some more because of the like the new. Well, one is the Alicinas paper, and the other one is the Stouffer's. And there is more variability explained, but I don't know if it's worth for this particular question, right? So like the extra parameter that is free parameter, I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. So I don't see any raised hand. Any comment, or Leo, do you want to close this second day of the workshop?
So I think that we are done today, and we have the last day tomorrow. And well, and I don't know, everything was fine. Yeah, and we had a small problem with the fourth talk that will be divided in two parts in YouTube because the software crashes. But well, we do the best. So no, nothing else. We'll see you tomorrow, and will be a great day with the Ricard talk about bioengineering, the biosphere.
Great. So yeah, talks are on demand on the YouTube channel. I already said this yesterday, and we are saying it every day. But for you, I would like to rehear these talks. Those are on the YouTube channel. And yes, I think that there is no more to say. And see you tomorrow.